Begin in Qatar, where American officials are meeting with the Taliban for the first time since the United States withdrew from Afghanistan. So for the latest, let's get over live to Lazima Gomes, who joins us from Doha. So what can we expect today, Lazima?
Well, what we can expect today would be that the Taliban spokesperson Zubahillah Mujahid said that they aim to have future talks and meetings with Americans as well as European delegates so that they can discuss and have their views and suggestions about the current situation in Afghanistan. As for US, we can expect more talks about Afghanistan not being the hotbed for terrorism. US will also urge Taliban to allow humanitarian agencies access to the areas of need.
And so give us an idea of kind of how important are these talks and what are the big takeaways?
Well, most of the talks that happened yesterday revolved around humanitarian aid, as well as the implementation of the agreement that Taliban signed with Washington last year, which paved the way for the final US withdrawal. During the meeting, discussions were made about humanitarian assistance, and US has offered COVID vaccines to Afghan citizens. The acting foreign minister, Mullah Amir Khan Mutaki, said Afghanistan is looking for the international community to help solve its financial woes. The Taliban has also insisted that the US honor the 2020 agreement as well as lift bans on Afghan central bank assets, as they said that it needs to be able to pay its employees and be able to provide services to Afghan people. The Taliban further said that it does not want US anti-terrorism assistance and warned Washington against any so-called over-the-horizon attacks on Afghan territory from outside the country's borders.
All right, Lazima Gomes live for us in Doha. Thank you. The Taliban have begun sending Afghans who are living in tents in a Kabul park back to their homes in the country's north.
We made the decision to send them back because the government doesn't have enough in the budget. That's why we asked all the NGOs and other charities located in Kabul to help us.
Officials say up to 1.3 million Afghans have been displaced by war. So far, only about 1,000 displaced families have been sent home. Many still remain in that camp in Kabul and are waiting for a place on a limited number of buses.
I'm nervous to go back because our house was destroyed by fighting and winter is on the way. There's no firewood. We need water and food.
And the United Nations is urging the world to provide the help promised to Afghanistan. An official says Afghanistan will need $600 million in the next few months for humanitarian operations, but only 35% has been provided by international donors. At a recent conference in Geneva, nations did pledge more than $1 billion in aid. Most of Afghanistan's international assistance, though, has been cut off. The country is also struggling with a drought and severe poverty from decades of war.
The humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan remains really dire. Nearly 700,000 Afghans have been displaced just this year. And this kind of takes the total of displaced people that are only affected by conflict to 3.5 million. So we are now in a race against time to help and support vulnerable, desperate Afghans. And winter is just around the corner. Our fear is if they are not helped as soon as possible, the consequences of this could be really worrying and more problematic.
So let's now bring in Syed Khan, who joins us from Detroit. He's a lecturer in history and Near East and Asian studies at Wayne State University. It's good to have you with us on the show. So the Afghan acting foreign minister, said the focus is on humanitarian aid in these talks. He's also asked the U.S. to lift the ban on frozen assets, but do you think they're going to get what they want?
I think that they are going to get some humanitarian aid, which is much needed. One of the pledges that the United States has made is to assist the Taliban in the distribution of COVID vaccines. But the main thing that the Taliban wants is to have their assets in the Afghan central bank unfrozen. And it's unlikely that that's going to happen at this time because the United States still sees that as a way to try to hold leverage over the Taliban regime, particularly on matters of human rights and some of the other issues that the United States tries to hold sway with. Of course, all of this is predicated on the idea that at this stage, the United States does not formally recognize the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan, but yet at the same time feels perfectly fine with holding bilateral talks with them. So it's a very strange relationship when it comes to the U.S. trying to leverage the Taliban, but at the same time recognizing that from a pragmatic standpoint, it has to deal with Taliban as the Kabul representative.
So with that in mind, do you expect any significant breakthroughs from these talks in Doha?
I think that the talks are significant because, after all, they are the first bilateral talks happening since the American withdrawal from Afghanistan several weeks ago. That is definitely going to be seen as a positive element because, as I said, they are taking the Taliban regime seriously, maybe not formally the legitimate government, but certainly the de facto one. And given the fact that the United States' main concern is one of security, they recognize then that the Taliban really do hold all the cards in Afghanistan. Now, the Taliban have said that they will honor the 2020 Doha Accord, with one of the provisos in that is that they would not provide support for or harbor any terrorist groups, whether it's Al-Qaeda or ISIS-K. It's interesting to see that part of the U.S. delegation is led by the CIA's Deputy Director, David Cohen. So for the United States, although there's certainly the official messaging that this is about humanitarian aid, clearly the security concerns are paramount for the U.S.
All right, Syed Khan, a lecturer at Wayne State University, speaking to us from Detroit. Thank you.